Welcome to a brand new episode of Power Moves YLN Edition. On this episode, I chat with Kelsey Woolley of REMAX Camosun in Victoria, BC. And Kelsey was one of the speakers at our Young Leaders Network event in St. John's, Newfoundland earlier this year. And she told a powerful story about getting into real estate, thinking she knew exactly what she was getting into, and then having life throw her some difficult curveballs. She talks about the challenge of balancing those things, building a real estate business while also going through some really difficult life situations, and how many agents experience burnout in their first couple of years. Kelsey provides a lot of really good advice on how you can deal with some of those challenges. And I think if you are somebody who is feeling burnt out, this is a must listen to episode. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Kelsey Woolley. From REMAX, this is Power Moves YLN Edition, where we chat with some of the best young REMAX agents in the network. My name is Wade Paterson. I'm an executive director with REMAX Canada, and I'm your host for this audio experience. And on this episode, I'm joined by Kelsey Woolley of REMAX Camosun in Victoria, BC. Kelsey moved to Victoria in 2004 and has been in love with the island lifestyle ever since. Being a second-generation realtor, Kelsey assumed she knew exactly what to expect in her first year of real estate. However, life threw a lot at her. At this year's Young Leaders Network event in St. John's, Kelsey shared a talk called The Invisible Hustle, where she told her story of trying to balance overcoming the loss of several loved ones to mental health while also starting a real estate business of her own. Kelsey, welcome to Power Moves YLN Edition.
Thanks so much for having me, Wade. I hope you're having a great day so far.
My day is going great. It's even better now that I'm chatting to you. Very excited about this conversation. And as I kind of preface there, I mean, we're going to talk about a little bit of heavy stuff. But before we get into that, on a lighter note, prior to real estate, my understanding was that you studied abroad in Bern, Switzerland. What did you gain from that life experience of traveling?
Yeah, I did study in Bern. I went to a very chill school. It was called Berner Fachhochschule Wirtschaft in Bern. And it was an amazing opportunity. I actually got into that with about a month's notice. I applied and said, oh, I'm probably not going to get it, but let's see what happens. And sure enough, a month later, I'm packing my bags and I'm taking a 14-hour flight to Switzerland. And that experience was really special. I had the opportunity to live in student housing for all the international students in the university. And I made friends across the world from Australia, Ireland, Brazil, the United States. And I really began to fall in love with learning people's stories. And these friendships, I'm still friends with them today. And we had the opportunity to travel to over 20 countries while we were studying abroad. And it was just really special.
How long did it take you to get the naming down of that school?
I think I'm still working on it. There's actually a couple words in there that I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to pronounce that.
So then transitioning into real estate. So you're a second generation realtor, but I'm always curious of, was that an inevitable career path for you? Was that something that was always in the back of your mind that I will end up in real estate, or how did that all come about?
It was always in the back of my mind. My mom got licensed when I was 10 years old. So when she got licensed, I think I had this fairy tale of what real estate was. I was like, I want to do that when you grow up. And as I grew older, maybe dipped my toes in a little bit of unlicensed assistant work and really saw how much work this job entailed, those late nights, the open houses on the weekends, showings at any moment in the day, the late night calls and strategy meetings. I thought to myself, okay, well, if I want to do that, I need to actually have some life experience, which is what led to me working in hospitality, traveling, and really trying to get a little bit more of that nuanced life experience under my belt. So there was a long period of time where I thought to myself, it might not work for me. I might not become a realtor. It'd be really cool if I did, but we'll see what happens. And sure enough, I think I was about 27 when finally the light bulb went off. And my mom and I were sitting in a cactus club, actually. And she said, I feel like you'd be great at it. And I looked at her, I was like, I actually really want to do it. And that was the beginning of what has become this amazing career.
And then what was it like after so you already had a little bit of an idea of what you were getting yourself into, but then when you actually take that step and you became an agent, what was that experience like?
Yeah, so I did my licensing and I was the epitome of that agent who wants to do everything. So every education event that was held in my office, I was there. Every single open house, I would fill my days. I remember very distinctly there was a period where I was trying to challenge myself to do 3 open houses in one day. And very quickly, once I had these experiences with loss in my own life, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm burning the stick at both ends. So expectations and reality quickly met up in the middle, and understanding that these changes were happening in my life, but also how do I juggle that with both this side of business and my own personal life?
And what was that like to come to that realization? Because what you talked about during your presentation at the YLN event was that there was always work to do, and so maybe you were putting off really dealing with some of the mental health challenges that you were experiencing as well. Can you kind of dive deeper into like specifically like what happened? What were those life experiences you had? And then the full story of like how you got to the point of working through that.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And thank you for asking. So, my experience was very unique. I actually had just gotten my first few clients, and I was so excited. Everything was going really well for me. And I was relying on a lot of agents for mentorship, and it was a really special time and what should have been amazing. And I got 2 calls within about 2 weeks of each other. And I found out that my close friend had lost their battle with mental health, and there was a memorial service that they were going to be doing fairly quickly. And the day after that memorial service, I found out that one of my best friends, from a call from his partner at the time, that he had also ended his life. And that was really difficult for me. It was almost the rug being pulled out because I actually volunteered while I was in college facilitating workshops for mental health, suicide prevention, education, and support, where we went to high schools and educated students on, that tool belt you really need. So I had the tools. But when you're in that moment of grief, you really don't realize how much you need it, and you need that support. It's very easy for each and every one of us to say, well, there's always something to do. There's always work that needs to be done, which is true to a certain degree in our industry. We're very much on call a lot of the time. And with that tool belt, it kind of took me some time. And it wasn't until my body physically decided it was done. I turned in my sleep one night and I had herniated 4 discs in my spine. And that was my wake up call that, okay, we need to look back at this tool belt and we need to start doing some research fast in how I can work through this so that I can not only show up for myself, but also, if I'm not careful, not be able to show up for my clients, which is the last thing I ever wanted.
The experience you went through, I mean, that's so much more than most people would have in their lives, and it's so challenging to get through. But one thing that you spoke about at your presentation was the fact that while that might be an extreme case, that a lot of agents actually have this commonality of same thing. Like there's always stuff to be working on, and even though they might not have that drastic of an experience, that still they're dealing with some of these things. And you had mentioned that there was a little bit of research you had done with regard to burnout that agents are experiencing. Can you kind of break down that idea? Because it's a lot of agents that don't make it in this career because of burnout, to my understanding.
Yeah, you're totally right. So a lot of the research that I was doing was revolving around burnout because I was thinking, okay, is this just me right now? And I knew that a high percentage of agents leave within their first year, but I didn't really understand why. And from that research, I started to look at academic studies from Baylor University, Harvard Business School, and other academic studies that were in trial runs for joy, gratitude, and our mental tool belts. And what I found was that real estate agents actually have the highest percentage of anxiety and depression amongst almost all professions. And that from one particular study, what I found was that 80% of real estate agents burn out in their first 2 years. And I reflected on that, thinking about our own journeys, because we're only really truly experts at our own journeys when it comes to mental health. Everybody's experience is going to be different, but we do know how that makes us feel. And in that research, I started to see, and the more I opened up with other agents, that yes, we were all going through this common experience in very different ways. But the really common theme was that many of us didn't have those tools or readily knew those tools. And we were acting very reactively rather than proactively.
What are some of these tools you talk about for somebody who's maybe listening to this and it's resonating with them of like, yeah, there's probably a lot going on in my life that I haven't really dealt with. Are there a few tips that you learned from your own experience?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so there's quite a few. But when I break it down, what the real commonality is that joy is a muscle. So joy really differs from happiness. Happiness is result driven, whereas joy is process driven. So it's really getting lost in the joy of our day to day lives. And I don't mean that in a toxic positivity way. I truly mean it like it is a muscle that we need to work out, much like exercising at the gym. So I really started to dive in and, okay, what is joy in my day to day life? And that looked like small things. That was the real commonality, seeing a flower that had just bloomed, maybe a butterfly had fallen on my shoulder. But then when I started to really work it out, I realized, well, joy is also listening to my clients' stories and talking about their journey and helping them through that journey together so that we can get them where they want to be. And there's immense happiness that comes with it, but really getting lost in the joy that got them there. And combined with that, there's some really good research surrounding how we lead our lives. And I looked at blue zones. So for those who don't know, blue zones are areas of high concentrations of people living over 100 years old. And one in particular that really stood out to me was in Japan, where they practice the concept of ikigai. And this is a great tool for many people. What they found is that the people who practice ikigai led longer lives, they had less ailments, and they were more resilient in difficult times. So the concept of ikigai is actually quite simple, and it ties into that joy piece. It's what you love, what you're good at, what your community needs, and what you can be paid for. And at that cross section is your ikigai, it's your purpose. So we really tried to begin to have that purpose in every single day of our business. And of course, it was another thing on the to-do list initially, but as time went on, we really started to notice that we were having really great conversations with our clients. We were feeling more fulfilled, and we were actually finding these little nuggets of joy in our day-to-day that we otherwise wouldn't have even thought to notice.
I want to really break this down so it's tangible, like this idea of ensuring that your business is purpose driven and that you're able to find that joy within it. So was this something where it was kind of like almost an energy audit of looking at all the different aspects of the business and things that you enjoy doing versus things that feel more like a task? Or like, how did you document these different pieces and actually have a strategy for everything we're talking about, having a purpose-driven business?
So it started, yes, with an energy audit. What was draining us? What was bringing us joy? And really honing in on what was bringing us joy. We found out, certain things I did not bring me joy at all. Some people love networking, some people love um, going to a party and meeting new people, some people love social media. But what I found for myself was I really loved our community. So we really broke that down and started to lean into that. And when we began to break that down, it started to turn into a lot of beautiful volunteering opportunities. My mom right now, she's raising a guide dog with BC Alberta Guide Dogs, something that we would never have thought that was going to happen. She's about 9 months old now, and she's pretty cute. And for myself, before I was in real estate, I got a qualification to teach English as a second language, and I never thought I was going to use it. Even when I was in the course, I was like, why am I here right now? But as I was slowly starting to get into that joy and really realizing that I loved our community and loved helping others, and that was making me really happy, I started to look for these opportunities, and I found myself with a local Parks and Rec initiative that was offering free English classes to recent immigrants and refugees to Canada, who most of these people, they didn't speak a word of English, highly qualified people who had master's degrees or higher, but couldn't get a job because they didn't speak English. And this was around when the Ukrainian war and Russian war had started. So a lot of our students were Ukrainian or from Iran. And a lot of these students, as we were learning their stories, I've now been teaching them for about 2.5 years, and seeing them go from barely being able to answer, how are you? What's your name? And having conversations. And not only that, telling me how to speak English, which they forget. So it's small things like that you can integrate into your life that also just bring you an immense amount of satisfaction into your workplace.
What I love about that is that, first off, you're basically building a business that is something that you're excited about every single day, or your involvement in your day-to-day life. But also, I think that's really powerful. I mean, there's many REMAX agents across the country who are very passionate about whether it's donating or volunteering time to their communities. But I would imagine as consumers as well, that's a pretty appealing thing to want to use an agent who is so involved with the community. I know that's not why you're doing these things. It's to genuinely help. But like, I think that maybe there'd be spin-off business benefits as well. Kelsey, I want to ask you about the YLN event itself and just your thoughts of, you mentioned maybe networking isn't your favorite part of the business, but going to this type of event, did you get value out of being in St. John's this year?
Oh, absolutely. I maybe I misspoke there. I do like networking, but I do enjoy it. I am truly a people person, but I found so much value in it. The education that was provided, especially from the other agents, if you truly listen to people and really get to know their story, you'd be amazed what you learned. And if you don't learn anything, maybe you might not be listening. But I don't think I left a single conversation from that event where I didn't say, wow, I could truly use that in my business. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness. Not only that, we have such an amazing community of people in the YLN network. I think I've made some of the best friends that I never would have made without an event like that.
And speaking of agents sharing their stories and talking, as I mentioned, you were part of what we called Take the Stage. And so this was an opportunity to put in an application to speak on the stage at YLN as part of the education component. It's something that we'll be offering at Activate. By the time this airs, the application will have been done, but we will bring it back again next year for the YLN event. So if there's somebody listening to this who is thinking, wow, I'd really love to do that, but I don't know, I haven't done a lot of speaking before, but I do feel like I have a story to tell, what would you share with them based on your experience?
Just do it. Yeah. It saying a Nike phrase at that point, but honestly, even if you're scared to do it scared, because the value of it, of providing information to fellow agents who may be in similar circumstances to you, or even just starting out their careers, is incredibly valuable.
Love that. And so a final question for you, Kelsey. We like to end every episode of Power Moves YLN Edition with the same question we ask, and that is, what is your power move when it comes to real estate? And I understand that this question, based on what we've been talking about, is maybe a harsh transition, but just in general, I mean, you've talked about a lot of things, which is bringing joy into your business, which perhaps that's the direction you want to go. But if you had to answer, what is your power move when it comes to real estate? What are your thoughts?
I would say my power move is listening.
Mhm.
Actively listening in a sense of, getting curious of what our clients truly have to say and what our community has to say. It does go into the joy piece because that does bring me a lot of joy, but I definitely say that if you just listen a little bit, you'd be amazed what happens.
I love that. Well, Kelsey, thank you so much for sharing your story, not only at YLN on the Take the Stage section, but as part of this podcast as well. I had a lot of fun chatting on this episode of Power Moves YLN Edition.
Thanks so much for having me, Wade.